små grodorna, är lustiga att se. Små grodorna, är lustiga att se. Öron, svansar hava dig. Öron, svansar hava dig. O quack, 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 o quack, 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 o quack, 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 quack. Quack, 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 o quack, 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 o quack, 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 quack. That song comes from the Swedish Midsummer Festival. And if you've never seen it before, there is an information card over there. And go check out Alexander Skarsgård explaining that song on Jimmy Fallon. It is hysterically funny. Festivals is what I want to talk to you about today. Specifically, creating festivals in a fantasy world. What they mean, and how they can help you build an engaging culture. Before we get into it, thank you very much for 200 subscribers on the board. I'm over the moon. It has been a very exciting 3-month journey starting this channel. As you can see, I now have a boom mic. See? And I hope that this little boom arm will help improve the quality of my sound. If you haven't yet, please do hit the subscribe button down below. It really does help the channel grow. Okay, let's get cracking on festivals. So how I'm going to break down today's topic is I'm going to discuss where festivals come from in our world. And I'm going to give you some examples of festivals from our world. And then along with fantasy authors who have done festivals really well in their worlds. Then I'm going to break down how you create a festival by dissecting how I created a festival for my world, for the novel that I'm writing. Okay, off we go. So first, let's talk about where festivals come from and why we have them. Time-based festivals are festivals that we create around important times for us to celebrate. Typical examples are the solstice festivals, winter solstice and summer solstices. The summer solstice is very celebrated up here in the Nordics. In Finland, we call it Johannes, and we light massive bonfires on that night. They're really quite spectacular to see. In Sweden, they have the maypoles around which they dance singing their small green frog song. And it's generally a big celebration in the northern part of the hemisphere as the summer comes. Of course, typically May Day celebrations with maypole dancing in England is also a tradition. If you've never seen maypole dancing, I link a video over here to maypole dancing. It is an incredible activity. And it's quite stunning when you end up in the end of it with these intricately plaited ribbon patterns around the pole. All of these festivals celebrate a specific time of the year and they come annually. And I think that the birthplace of these festivals come from needing to know that winter will end, needing to know that we are now at the height of summer, celebrating life. An author who does a particularly excellent midwinter festival is Jacqueline Carey from the Kashil books. She shows us 2 different cultures celebrating midwinter in different ways. Her kind of based on the French culture in Terre d'Ange, celebrated with a masked ball where they have this spectacular glittering affair and there's a play and they drink this drink called joy and everybody dresses up in, formal attire and masks and there's this massive party kind of hearkening back to Venetian carnival. And then across the channel in Alba, which is kind of a Celtic kingdom, they have not a midwinter night, not a solstice festival, but instead the day after, they have the Day of Misrule, which is where everything is turned topsy-turvy, the least becomes the greatest, and the whole day turns into an upside-down day. And it's very interesting to see the two different cultural celebrations so juxtaposed. So, and it highlights how different these two cultures are. Terre de Ange is about the celebration of beauty and sumptuousness, and it's a very, I guess what we would call a very cultured affair. While the Celtic affair is much more intimate and funny, and it's about having fun at that point, much less than about the formal politics and the pomp and ceremony that happens in Terre de Ange. And so you can see these two cultures highlighted very effectively with their two different midwinter celebrations. Of course, that's not the only reason why we have why we have celebrations. We also celebrate events, the birth of someone, the death of someone, the end of a great event. An example from up here, from where I live in Finland, on the 6th of December, we celebrate Republic Day. That's the day on which we claimed our independence from Russia. Back in 1917, when they were a little bit distracted with having a small internal revolution, we decided that we were done with Russia, and so we celebrate Republic Day by putting 2 candles in the window. This tradition comes from back when we first declared independence, but as time has gone on, additional layers of celebration have been added. And we no longer just put in place the 2 candles, we also, raise the flags on flagpoles, and some of the bakeries will have pastries that are decorated in the blue and white of the Finnish flag and so on. So the celebration changes over time as new traditions are born around it. Even in such a short period as a century. And another example of festivals that are so sort of time-based, of course, are coronations. And if anybody watches The Crown from the Netflix series, you can see that the pomp and ceremony that goes into a coronation festival and a coronation ceremony, and how each little piece of that ceremony comes from a different era and a different tradition. And so it's very interesting to kind of layer your traditions as time has passed. An author who does a good job of that kind of event-based festivals is Raymond Feist, who has the showing of the royal babies. And what happens is, when a royal child is born, the baby is put on show for everybody to see, and people can go ahead and, go view the babies, and it's a day-wide celebration in the city. But then, in The King's Buccaneer, one of the royal children is born with a deformity. He has a deformed foot, a club foot. And his father refuses to put him on show because of that. And that, of course, begins to then change the tradition, because will it come again? Will they again have a royal showing now that they've once not had it? And they actually do comment on that in the book, and the changing nature of that kind of festival around time-based events. You can also have produce-based events. Harvest festivals, of course, are very popular. Up in Canada, I believe they have a lot of maple festivals, which is when you tap the maple tree, and it's the first creation of sugar, generally done in spring. And of course, famously in Germany, just below us, they have Oktoberfest, which is a festival of beer, which is a produce-based festival. Produce-based festivals are fantastic for really highlighting what your culture produces. If you think about the things that I've just spoken about, harvest festival, sure, but beer festival for Germany. I mean, Germany is synonymous with beer, and they have a beer festival. Canada for maple syrup. Canada is synonymous with maple syrup, and they have maple syrup festivals. So it really serves to highlight the product, the agricultural product, I should say, that is the mainstay of your country's economic principles. So don't forget about produce-based festivals when you're building a world. I actually couldn't find a great produce-based festival. The closest I came was another Jacqueline Carey reference. She did a great job in festivals in general, where she had an apple picking festival around the making of brandy, apple brandy and apple ciders. And the royal party went out and they all had to pick apples from the trees, and it was a contest on who could pick the most apples, and it was a fun kind of picnic day out. But it didn't really highlight per se the produce of the Terre d'Ans nation. So it's worth thinking about that, about produce-based festivals in an economic context, not just a cultural one. And then lastly, of course, religious festivals. I mean, I am going to do a comprehensive deep dive into religion starting on Friday, when I will cover religion in general in fantasy world, and then I'll deep dive into specific religions. But briefly on religious festivals. So religious festivals often co-opt existing festivals, but not always. So the example that I want to highlight from our world is the Holi festival, which is the Hindu festival where they celebrate the coming of spring. And it's also sometimes called the Festival of Colors, linked to a video about the Festival of Colors here of somebody experiencing the Festival of Colors in India. The thing about this particular festival is the Hindu religion is so old that asking which came first, the celebration of spring or the celebration of spring as a holy ritual of the Hindu religion, is actually a chicken egg kind of question. They kind of grew up together. So often religious festivals are around the birth of a king, the birth of a god, or the celebration of a name day of a god, or a saint in the Roman Catholic tradition, etc. But sometimes it can just be a celebration of life and a celebration of spring, as it is in the case of Holi. And again, I'm going to go to Jacqueline Carey. I might as well just leave her picture up at this point. So she again juxtaposes within the longest night celebration, the midwinter festival celebration. There's the ball that's going on at the palace, right? And people are dancing, and it's all masks and celebration and pomp and so on. And then the Catiline Brotherhood, so her Lancer character, Jocelyn Verul, is a Catiline brother. And instead of going to the midwinter masque, he goes to the temple of Eloah, where he meditates all night long, throughout the night, which of course is a very serious, very religious matter for him. And that is therefore the religious side of this festival. So there's two different elements to these festivals, depending on whether you are deeply religious, like the Catiline Brotherhood, or whether you tend more towards the other side of the Terre d'Ans, the religion, which is the celebration of life with a ball. Celebration of life and beauty, I should say, because they're very on the beauty line. Okay, so that is where festivals come from, and the fact that Jacqueline Carey has done festivals really well in a nutshell. If you're still here, please do give this video a like, and let's crack on with how to create a festival. First, decide on the original significance. What triggers this festival? So in my case, I needed a festival to highlight the winter solstice. So my original festival idea was I need to celebrate winter solstice. Okay, cool. Time-based festival. Then give it some history. Was it adapted from previous cultures? Was it were there new traditions added to it? So what I did was, I said the first celebration was by the Rulara, who are the people who live in the far north of my world, and they lit bonfires because they live in an area where the longest night is a day-long affair. You know, it's polar night, so there's a period where it's literally so dark that the sun doesn't come up for more than 24 hours. And so they light bonfires in order to ward off the darkness. And then they're surrounded by a lot of trees, a lot of birchwood, that kind of trees. So they took to carving their wishes for the new year in wood. So making little wood figurines that symbolizes their wishes for the new year and throwing these into the fire to burn them. For the smoke, to carry the wishes up to the sky, to the ghost lights, which is the Aurora Borealis, because of course they have the Aurora Borealis during that time. Okay, so that was my original ceremony. Then, over time, the Rulara came down to the Bloedpen, and the people of the Bloedpen encountered the Rulara, and they made new ceremonies. Now, the tribes of the Bloedpen practiced, a form of blood magic, where the shamans, called trollkarls, would sacrifice the lives of tribesmen in order to generate power in order for them to cast spells with. So they incorporated this ritual and sacrificed 12 members of the tribe every new year in order to ensure that the new year would be successful. So you now had the Rulara fires, and you had the wishes, and then you had 12 people being sacrificed in a blood sacrifice to generate power for the shaman, to bring prosperity for the tribe for the new year. Okay, then the Konsang came, and the Konsang is a conquering people. Well, they arrived as refugees and stayed as kind of conquerors, but it was kind of a collaborative conquering of the tribes. But the net result of the Konsang and the tribal unification was the trollkarls and their magic were outlawed. So the taking of the sacrifices was taken. But the Konsang brought with them their religion, which is a reincarnation-based religion. And so they, instead of having just a simple bonfire, the bonfire became a wheel shape, right, to symbolize the death and rebirth. And the wheels and the spokes of the wheels, there are 12 spokes to the wheel for the 12 lives that were sacrificed previously by the shamans. And the Konsang tradition was that on the winter solstice, you would feed old bread to the fire in order to symbolize the old dying and the new being born. And so that was added to the ritual. So my final form of this ritual was that you had wishes being carved that were thrown into a fire that was laid out in the shape of a wheel. And there were 12 people who would dance, fire dancers, who would dance the 12 dances that would bring in the new year, in symbolism of the 12 people who used to be sacrificed to create the prosperity for the tribe for the new year. Okay, there's the history of my Festival of Flames. Now, your next question is defining some rituals about it. So, and that's what I've just explained now, is how I came to those rituals. But the best way to define those rituals is to understand the history of your festival and why those rituals therefore exist. Then you need to give your festival a memorable quirk. Okay, so my quirk is the fire dancing, which I think is very memorable. I also added fire lanterns, but I'm in two minds as to whether I want to take them away or leave them there and just have the wishes be tossed into the fire. Comment below, what do you think? Should I have lanterns being released that carry the wishes up? Or should I just stick with throw the wishes into the fire? Let me know. So give your festival a memorable quirk, and then finally name your festival. Now, as I've said before, naming things is hard. So you want all of the information you can have before you actually name the thing, so that when you name it, it makes sense. So given everything that went before, I very inventively called my festival the Festival of Flames. If you have a better idea for a name, comment below. And that is my take on creating festivals in a fantasy world. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please do give it a thumbs up if you have. And I will see you on Friday for religion in a fantasy world.